Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Jerry Lawson, and for 9 years, I was the senior financial analyst at a company I helped build, Arkmore Systems, a fast-growing tech firm based in Seattle. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I let my spreadsheets do the talking. I was the guy who found patterns, ones nobody wanted to see. For most of my time there, I worked under Richard Klein, our meticulous and upright CFO. Richard wasn't the kind of man who bent numbers or kissed up to the board. He ran the finance department like a tight ship, and we all respected him. He used to call me his last line of defense. He said every company needed someone too stubborn to ignore the truth, even when it hurt. Then Richard had a heart attack. It was sudden. One week he was pushing back on aggressive revenue projections from the sales department, and the next, he was gone, retired early with a shaky heart and a quiet exit. In his place came a man named Vaughn Mercer. Vaughn swept in like a hurricane from a major East Coast firm, sleek suits, designer watch, and a smile that never reached his eyes. The board adored him. He promised aggressive growth, streamlined systems, AI-powered projections, and next-gen financial leadership. He also brought a new team, young, loyal, ambitious. And from the moment Vaughn arrived, things changed. The first shift was subtle, my access to certain files quietly disappeared. I asked IT, no one seemed to know why. Then came the exclusions. I wasn't invited to the usual finance leadership syncs. Weekly updates became bi-weekly. Reports I used to compile were reassigned to lighten your load, Jerry. At first, I chalked it up to new leadership turbulence. I tried to be cooperative, assuming I was just part of the old guard adapting to a new culture. But then the numbers stopped adding up. It started with a vendor invoice, $140,000 paid to a marketing subcontractor I'd never heard of. No supporting documents. No contract. No approval chain. Then there were the revenue reports. Q2 showed income from projects that hadn't even started yet. I double-checked everything. Pulled archival logs. Reran reports. It wasn't a mistake. The books were being manipulated. Twice I brought it up in meetings. Vaughn gave me that tight smile, the kind you use when someone said something inconvenient at a party. Different methodologies, Jerry. Trust the process. The third time, I caught him in the break room. I'm concerned, Vaughn, I said quietly. The Q2 revenue reports are recognizing income from unsigned contracts. He stirred his espresso, not looking at me. You're a legacy asset, Jerry. And I mean that with respect. But we're not accounting like it's 2008 anymore. The board wants vision, not hesitation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Because here's the thing, I wasn't wrong. And I knew what Vaughn was doing wasn't just aggressive accounting, it was fraud. Subtle, well-dressed, systematic fraud. I started documenting everything. Copies. Timelines. Spreadsheets. Patterns. Everything went on a secure flash drive I kept in my wallet. A week later, I got the email. HR meeting, 11 a.m. And just like that, everything I'd built started to fall apart. I walked into the conference room, and there they were, Vaughn and Paula from HR, sitting like two prosecutors waiting for the accused. We're restructuring the finance department, Paula said. Your position is being eliminated. Eliminated? I asked calmly. Analytics are evolving, Vaughn chimed in. We need agility. Your legacy role just doesn't fit anymore. They slid a severance folder across the table. 6 months' pay. Full benefits. A non-disclosure agreement thick enough to choke a horse. I opened it. Buried in legalese was a clause barring me from discussing any financial methodologies or proprietary practices used by Arkmore. They weren't just firing me. They were gagging me. Take your time reviewing it, Paula said. I smiled politely. I'll need to run this by my attorney. Vaughn's eyes flickered. That wasn't the answer he wanted. But he just nodded and said, of course. Security escorted me back to my desk. I packed my things in a cardboard box while my coworkers pretended not to look. Except for Ava, my assistant. She slipped me a note while pretending to hand me an old coffee mug. Check your email backup. Q3 projections were edited last night. Jason saw it. I nodded once, a silent thank you. They thought this was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. It's one thing to be fired. It's another to be erased. That's what it felt like when I walked out of Arkmore Systems, cardboard box in hand, escorted like a criminal. They hadn't just taken my job. They'd taken my reputation, my access, and my voice. I'd built that department. Helped take Arkmore from a scrappy tech firm with 30 employees to a publicly traded company worth $500 million. And now I was just gone. Like I never existed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the NDA spread out in front of me, untouched dinner growing cold beside me. My wife, Melissa, sat across from me. She stared at the severance folder like it was a live grenade. This isn't a severance agreement, she finally said. It's a muzzle. 6 months' salary was generous. I wasn't blind to that. But it came with a price, my silence. If I signed, I couldn't go to the SEC. I couldn't talk to the board. Hell, I couldn't even talk to a journalist. Do they think you're stupid? She asked. They're trying to buy you off. I looked down at the flash drive in my hand, the one I'd kept in my wallet like insurance. Every spreadsheet. Every discrepancy. Every lie. They're scared, I murmured. Or they wouldn't be paying me to disappear. The next morning, I called my brother-in-law, Calvin. He worked for the Department of Justice, specifically on white-collar crime. We weren't close, we mostly saw each other at holidays, and even then, I was the guy who talked too much about earnings reports while he read court cases on his phone. But I knew Calvin had a mind for law, and more importantly, integrity. Can we talk? I said over the phone. Off the record. That night, he came over. He read through the document slowly, his expression tightening with each line. When he reached the financial projections from Q3 and saw how they'd shifted week to week, his jaw clenched. This is bad, he said. Very bad. And if they submitted these reports to the SEC or made public statements based on these numbers, they've committed securities fraud. I told him about Vaughn. About the culture shift. The silencing. The vague threats dressed up in corporate lingo. Did you sign this NDA? He asked, tapping the packet. No. Good, he said. Because if you had, you'd be in serious legal jeopardy just for talking to me. Melissa sat beside me, her eyes wide. So what now? That depends, Calvin said, looking at me. Are you willing to be a whistleblower? I didn't answer immediately. The word whistleblower sounded noble on the news, but in real life? It meant courtrooms. Stress. Being blackballed by an industry that doesn't like truth-tellers. It meant dragging my family through the mud. I don't want to be famous, I said. I don't want headlines. You won't be, Calvin said. Most whistleblowers aren't. You'll be anonymous, at first. But the moment this becomes public, they'll come for you. Vaughn. The board. Their lawyers. They'll try to discredit you, bury you in legal fees, ruin your name. Melissa put her hand on mine. But if you don't do this, then they win. The next day, I called Ava, discreetly. I asked her about the Q3 projections. She hesitated. They changed everything after you left. Jason said Vaughn's team worked until 2 a.m. Friday night editing your files. Do you still have access? A pause. Not officially. But, maybe. I need one thing, I said. The draft version from 2 days before my termination. The one I finalized. That night, I received a Dropbox link. Inside were files dated, timestamped, and signed off by me, showing very different numbers than what Arkmore later filed publicly. The manipulation wasn't subtle. It was strategic. They'd inflated expected revenue by 18%, shifted expenses into the next quarter, and used those inflated projections to justify stock-based bonuses for the C-suite. And it wasn't just Vaughn. 2 board members had signed off on the documents. This went deeper than one bad apple. I met Calvin again the next morning at a diner on the outskirts of town. I slid him the flash drive, the emails, the financials. You're not dealing with one fraudster, he said. You're dealing with a network. I know. You still want to do this? No, I admitted. But I have to. He made 2 phone calls from the parking lot. One to a contact at the SEC. One to a federal financial crimes prosecutor. By that evening, the wheels were in motion. But the cost came faster than I expected. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. A man's voice. Calm. Unfamiliar. You should think twice before you burn a bridge you can't rebuild. Then he hung up. The next morning, Melissa's car alarm went off at 3 a.m. Someone had slashed her tires. No robbery. No theft. Just a message. We filed a police report. Nothing came of it. The day after that, a smear blog post appeared online under an anonymous name, accusing me of incompetence, poor performance, and failure to adapt to modern financial standards. It was clearly written by someone with inside access, referencing internal meetings, report names, and dates. I sent it to Calvin. They're trying to discredit you early, he said. Classic strategy. Control the narrative before the real one emerges. I was spiraling. I stopped sleeping. Melissa started checking the locks twice a night. Every noise outside our window made me jump. Arkmore wasn't just protecting its bottom line. They were protecting powerful people, people willing to destroy anyone who threatened their golden parachutes. Then, a week later, I got an unexpected visitor. Ava. She showed up at my front door, eyes red. I'm sorry, she said. I should have done this sooner. She handed me a printed spreadsheet, something I hadn't seen before. It was dated 2 weeks before Richard's heart attack. And it showed projected earnings, drastically inflated, flagged by Richard with a note in the margin. This is unethical. I won't sign off. That was the last quarter Richard ever worked. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Richard hadn't just retired early. He'd resisted them, and been removed. I think they pushed him out, Ava whispered. Or worse. My knees went weak. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about professionalism, about Arkmore, it was all a lie. This wasn't just fraud. This was a cover-up. A war. And I had just become its most dangerous enemy. The document Ava brought changed everything. It was just one page, just a spreadsheet with a handwritten note from Richard, my old boss, but it felt like a nuclear bomb. Because I recognized his handwriting. He had this habit of writing in all caps, pressing down hard like he was carving the truth into the page. This is unethical. I won't sign off. It was dated exactly 14 days before Richard suffered what was publicly called a stress-induced cardiac event. I stared at it, hands trembling. I found it buried in the archive, Ava said. They deleted the original from the live system, but the backup servers still had it. I printed it before Vaughn's team could scrub everything. I looked up at her. You're risking everything, I said. She gave me a bitter smile. I watched them erase you, Jerry. I watched good people get replaced by silence. I can't pretend anymore. The next day, I brought the file to Calvin and the SEC contact he had looped in, Monica, a tough-as-nails forensic investigator with a memory like a steel trap. She read the document 3 times in silence. Then she said, "This isn't just confirmation. It's a timeline." She turned to a whiteboard and started writing. 2 weeks before cardiac event, Richard objects to manipulated financials. 5 days later, Richard begins working remotely, citing health concerns. 3 days later, Richard hospitalized. 1 week after that, Vaughn Mercer appointed as interim CFO. "That's not a coincidence," I said. "No," Monica agreed. "It's a blueprint." And then she dropped the real bombshell. Richard's last call before he was hospitalized wasn't to his doctor. It was to someone in our office. A junior SEC agent named Lee. He was trying to report what he found. I stared at her, stunned. Why didn't the SEC act? She sighed. Lee logged the call, but there wasn't enough documentation. No formal whistleblower complaint. Richard never followed up. Then the board announced his retirement, and the lead dried up. "Until now," Calvin added quietly. I leaned back, my chest tight. So Richard had tried. He'd seen what I'd seen, maybe more. And he'd tried to do the right thing. But he'd been silenced before he could. And now it was my turn to finish what he started. That night, I drove to Richard's house. Melissa begged me to be careful. Calvin offered to come with me. But I needed to do it alone. I hadn't spoken to Richard since the day he left Arkmore. Rumor was he'd gone into early retirement, focusing on his health and avoiding stress. But the truth was more painful. When he opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller, frilier. Like a man carrying the weight of betrayal in his bones. "Jerry," he said, surprised. "I didn't expect you." "I found your note," I said. "The one about the projections. I know what happened. I need your help." He hesitated, then opened the door wider. We sat in his kitchen, surrounded by untouched takeout containers and medical bills. He poured us both tea, but didn't drink. "They wanted me to lie," he said quietly. "Push numbers up, shift expenses, manipulate earnings." I refused. They said I was being difficult. Then the stress hit me like a truck. I handed him the spreadsheet Ava gave me. His hands shook as he held it. "They erased everything I did," he muttered. "Rewrote the narrative. Replaced the data. And then they replaced me." "You tried to go to the SEC," I said. He nodded. "But I waited too long. I didn't have documentation, just suspicion. I was going to follow up after the hospital, but I never had the strength. I thought maybe it was just me. Maybe I was overreacting." "You weren't," I said. "And I have proof. I've been collecting it." Richard looked at me, and something in his face changed, like a flicker of hope he'd buried long ago sparked back to life. "I'm in," he said. With Richard's testimony, the investigation shifted into overdrive. Monica and her team reopened the original file Richard had started. She used my spreadsheets, Ava's recovered backups, and Richard's witness statement to form a clear timeline of events. But what they discovered next shocked even me. The fraud had started months earlier, before Vaughn arrived. And the pressure to inflate earnings? It had come from the board. Specifically, 3 directors who had joined the company last year, each from aggressive venture capital firms with a reputation for high-stakes, tech turnarounds. They'd pushed for short-term growth, demanded faster revenue cycles, and tied executive bonuses to stock price. And when Richard refused to play along, they engineered his exit and brought in Vaughn, someone willing to dance to their tune. This wasn't just a crooked CFO. This was a coordinated effort to defraud investors, boost share prices, and set the company up for a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. And if they pulled it off, the directors would cash out at the top, leaving everyone else holding a bag full of lies. They were going to bury the truth, Calvin said grimly. Until now. We needed more than data. We needed timing. The SEC couldn't move until Arkmore submitted their next quarterly report, one we knew would be full of fraudulent data. That's when Monica said something that changed everything. We're not going to stop them from filing, she said. We're going to let them file. Then hit them after, when it's on record. The plan was risky. The moment Arkmore filed false numbers with the SEC, it became criminal. That filing would be the smoking gun, the moment the fraud went from internal corruption to federal violation. But it also meant we had to let them walk into the trap. So we waited. 3 days before the quarterly filing, I got a message from Jason, one of my old analysts. Emergency finance meeting. Saturday. Vaughn's final prep for Q3. Numbers don't match. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Monica. The net was tightening. The night before the filing, I sat with Melissa on the back porch. Neither of us said much. Are you ready for what happens next? She finally asked. No, I admitted. But I know I have to do it. She took my hand. Then I'm with you. All the way. I looked up at the stars, cold, distant, unblinking. Tomorrow, the storm would hit. And the people who thought I'd stay silent. They were about to learn just how loud the truth could be. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who plotted revenge. I was a numbers guy. Quiet. Methodical. My idea of a good Friday night was triple-checking cash flow forecasts with a glass of wine. But Arkmore changed that. Vaughn changed that. The board turned me from a loyal employee into a silent enemy, and now, I was done being silent. The day before the Q3 report was due, I met with Monica and her SEC task force in an anonymous office building across town. The conference room looked ordinary, whiteboard, coffee machine, a flickering overhead light, but the tension in that room crackled. We move when they move, Monica said, pinning the timeline to the wall. Once that quarterly report hits the SEC system, we have proof of federal securities fraud. Not just sloppy accounting, intentional deception of investors. I glanced at the wall, where a printed organizational chart of Arkmore was pinned up. Vaughn Mercer. CEO Brenda McAllister. Board directors, 3 from Luminous Capital. All of them had their fingerprints on the numbers. How long until the raid? I asked. Monica gave me a tight smile. Less than 24 hours, if they do what we expect. But until then, we need complete radio silence. No leaks, Calvin added. No texts. No messages to Jason or Ava. No breadcrumbs. I nodded. I understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was justice. They thought they were safe because they were rich. Protected by power, lawyers, and NDAs. But they'd made one critical mistake. They underestimated a man who knew how to read the fine print. Back at home, Melissa and I prepped like we were going to war. We changed our phone numbers. Calvin arranged for encrypted communication channels. I secured all the flash drives, printed evidence, and signed witness statements in a fireproof lockbox. At night, I barely slept. My dreams were filled with numbers, cells turning red in Excel, lines of code erasing evidence, Richard's shaky handwriting screaming at me from the past. I kept thinking about what Ava said, that they were rewriting history. Well, I wasn't going to let them. Saturday came like a ticking clock. At 9:04 a.m., Jason texted me from a burner phone. They're finalizing Q3 now. Vaughn locked the room. All hands tomorrow. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Monica. She wrote back, "We're ready." That night, the anxiety hit me like a freight train. I paced the living room until Melissa pulled me into a hug. "Do you regret this?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I hate what it's cost." She nodded. "Then make sure it costs them more." Monday morning. The day of the filing. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock. 7:15 a.m. Monica texted, "Internal filing approved. Final version uploaded." 7:58 a.m. Calvin, stand by. Watching SEC submission portal. 8:02 a.m. Q3 report submitted. My phone didn't buzz. It exploded. "Monica, we've got it. Confirmed manipulation. Executive signatures verified. It's go time." By 8:30 a.m., federal agents were already entering Arkmore HQ with subpoenas and warrants in hand. By 9:15 a.m., security footage showed Vaughn being escorted out of the building, shoulders tense, lips pressed tight. Behind him, Brenda McAllister and 2 board members followed, pale and wordless. I watched it all from my phone, heart pounding. The same glass doors I'd walked through with a cardboard box. Now the ones they were being marched out of in handcuffs. Later that afternoon, I met with Monica in person again. Her team had acted faster than anyone expected. "Turns out," she said, flipping open a file, "your little operation uncovered a $42 million fraud spread across multiple quarters." "What about the acquisition?" I asked. She nodded grimly. "It was days away. The whole scam was designed to inflate stock value before the sale. If they'd gotten away with it, the VC firms would have cashed out, and regular shareholders would have been stuck with worthless paper." I swallowed hard. "So they were going to leave everyone else holding the bag." "Exactly. But thanks to you, the bag's now evidence." That evening, Jason finally called me. "I saw it all," he said, voice shaking. "They shut down the server room. Pulled everyone into meetings." Vaughn didn't even look surprised, just defeated. "Are you okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "They're saying your name, Jerry. Quietly. Some are calling you a snitch. Others, a hero." "I don't care what they call me," I said. "I care that the truth is out." Jason exhaled. "We're rebuilding the numbers from scratch. Monica's team is in every room. They brought in auditors. It's chaos." "I'm sorry," I said. "No," he replied. "Thank you." Before hanging up, he added, "For what it's worth. You were right. All of it." The next morning, I got an email. Subject, formal apology from Arkmore board. It read like a hostage statement, acknowledging my termination had been premature, that my concerns should have been taken seriously, and that they were committed to transparency going forward. And then came the offer. They wanted me to return. Not just return, but lead an internal integrity division. With full authority. I laughed. Not bitterly. Just empty. I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Later that week, Calvin came by with news. Justice Department's opening a separate criminal investigation into Arkmore's board, he said. You're going to be asked to testify. Officially. I nodded. I'm ready. He paused. There's something else. We found internal emails, ones between Vaughn and Luminous Capital. They were orchestrating this long before Richard left. So he was right, I whispered. From the beginning. And so were you, Calvin said. You did what most people wouldn't. You stood up. I looked at the flash drive still sitting on my desk. The same one they tried to silence. And I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. Theirs was built on lies. Mine was built on truth. And now. It was time for the world to hear it. The news broke before sunrise. SEC raids Arkmore systems after alleged multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Whistleblower behind massive tech scandal remains anonymous. Anonymous. For now. But it wouldn't stay that way. Monica warned me, once subpoenas are issued and names start surfacing in court documents, people will figure it out. Especially the media. I thought I'd be afraid. I wasn't. Because the moment they tried to destroy me with that NDA, they turned me into someone I never thought I'd be. A man with nothing to lose, and the receipts to prove it. That Monday, I walked into a federal building downtown and took the stand. It was a closed-door deposition with the SEC and Justice Department attorneys. Monica sat to my left. Calvin sat across from me, no longer just my brother-in-law, but now part of the official inquiry. The questions came in waves. When did you first notice inconsistencies? What was Vaughn Mercer's response to your concerns? Can you verify this spreadsheet's version history? Did you ever speak with Richard Klein prior to his hospitalization? I answered them all. Every document. Every email. Every meeting Vaughn dismissed me from. Every fabricated projection. Every time they tried to gaslight me. When it ended, Monica placed her hand on my shoulder. That was perfect, she said. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. 2 days later, the SEC froze Arkmore's accounts. Trading was suspended. Shareholders panicked. News channels ran back-to-back coverage with headlines like, "The fraud beneath the code, Arkmore implodes in tech scandal." And then it happened. The first arrest. Vaughn Mercer. He was picked up at his lakeside condo in Bellevue, trying to board a private helicopter. The footage went viral, him in handcuffs, face pale, jaw clenched. By the end of the week, CEO Brenda McAllister and 2 board members from Luminous Capital were also indicted. But the real shock came when Monica pulled me into a private call. "Jerry," she said, "we just found something unexpected." While digging through the servers with forensic analysts, they'd uncovered hidden communications, encrypted messages Vaughn had sent to an offshore consulting firm. The topic? Whistleblower targeting strategies. He hadn't just planned to fire me. He'd planned to discredit me publicly. He had a playbook, complete with fake performance reviews, internal complaints to HR that never existed, and even a dossier prepared in case I ever went to the media. "He was going to ruin you," Monica said. "But it never got that far," I said. "No," she replied. "Because you acted first." She paused. "But there's more." She sent me a file. Richard's full audit report. It had never been submitted. Because it had never been finished. But Richard had started outlining the exact methods the board used to pressure finance into inflating earnings. He documented calls, written directives, and compensation packages explicitly tied to falsified metrics. It was a smoking gun. And he'd hidden a copy of it, on a flash drive, buried in the metadata of an unrelated file. He was scared, I said aloud. But he still tried to get the truth out. "He saved your case," Monica replied. "And you saved his legacy." The very next day, Richard came out of retirement. He submitted a formal sworn affidavit, verified under penalty of perjury. The Justice Department announced his cooperation publicly, positioning him as a critical witness in the unfolding criminal trial. He called me after the press conference. "I should have fought harder," he said. "No," I replied. "You fought just enough for me to pick up the baton." Then came my turn in the spotlight. A subpoena arrived for my testimony in front of a federal grand jury. Calvin coached me through everything. Be honest. Be precise. Let the evidence speak louder than your anger. But it was hard. Sitting in front of 12 jurors, explaining how people I once shook hands with lied to thousands of investors and tried to bury me like a problem. It made my hands shake. But I spoke anyway. Because they needed to hear what corruption really looked like, not in back alleys, but in boardrooms. 1 week after my testimony, the indictments widened. 5 more Arkmore executives. 2 external auditors. And the entire Luminous Capital delegation. By now, Arkmore's stock was worthless. The company that once claimed to be a unicorn was now a cautionary tale. The board sent me a final message through their new legal counsel, a formal settlement offer, asking for my silence moving forward in exchange for a 7-figure compensation package and public acknowledgement. I didn't even reply. Melissa looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "That's not what you want, is it?" "No," I said. "I don't want their money. I want the next person who tries this to remember what happened here." So I did something unexpected. I took my whistleblower award, which the SEC issued once the case hit federal court, and started my own firm. ClearPoint Integrity Consultants. We help startups and growing businesses implement real internal controls, ethical compliance programs, and, ironically, fraud prevention. The calls came fast. Law firms. Audit teams. Even universities asking me to speak. One day, I got an email from a small robotics company CEO. She wrote, "We saw what happened with Arkmore. We're trying to build something real, but we're growing fast and I'm scared we're missing things. Can you help us do this right?" I smiled. That's what it was about. Helping others avoid the hell I went through. Later that month, Monica invited me to speak at a closed-door SEC seminar. My talk was titled, "The Whistle You Never Want to Blow, but Might Have to." As I stood in front of regulators, analysts, and enforcement officers, I said, "They didn't fire me because I was wrong. They fired me because I was right, and I wouldn't shut up about it. If you take nothing else from my story, remember this: the truth is only dangerous to people who are lying." The room went silent. And in that silence, I heard something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I thought it was over. Arkmore's top brass were either behind bars, awaiting trial, or blacklisted. The press had moved on to the next corporate scandal. My name, once whispered with disdain, was now spoken with something like respect. But I should have known better. Corruption this deep doesn't die quietly. It mutates. It started with a knock on my door. A woman in a charcoal suit, badge clipped to her belt. "Department of Justice, Internal Affairs. We need to talk about Calvin," she said. I blinked. "My brother-in-law?" She nodded. "There's a complication. May we come in?" I let her and her partner in. Melissa stood nearby, folding her arms, tension already rising in her shoulders. The woman's voice was calm but heavy. "We've identified several sealed financial disclosures from Calvin's time working on your case. Offshore transactions, to be precise." "What are you saying?" She placed a folder on my kitchen table. Inside were screenshots, bank statements, and wire transfers, some small, others massive. They all pointed to one thing. Calvin had been receiving money from a third party connected to Luminous Capital. I felt my stomach drop. "No," I muttered. "That can't be right. We believe he was leaking selective information to outside interests, possibly even feeding them strategies to delay prosecution or negotiate lighter outcomes." Melissa's face went pale. "That's not possible. He's family. He's the one who, he brought this to the SEC." The woman nodded. "That's what makes this so troubling. They left without arresting him." "Not yet. But the damage was done. Calvin wasn't just involved. He may have been playing both sides. I confronted him that evening. I didn't call. I drove straight to his place, pounded on his door until he opened it. He looked tired. Hollow. "You knew," I said. He didn't deny it. "It wasn't what you think, Jerry," he said. "I didn't take bribes. I Then explain the transfers. Explain the shell accounts. Explain why the DOJ just spent an hour in my kitchen warning me my own family may have compromised the biggest fraud investigation in tech this decade. He flinched. They approached me after the SEC opened the case. Said I could be a consultant. A quiet one. I figured, if I could steer things, limit fallout, maybe protect you from the worst. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You didn't protect me. You used me. You handed my evidence to the people who tried to destroy me. No, I didn't give them the flash drive, or Monica's files. I swear. I just gave them a sense of timing. What the DOJ might do. I thought it would keep them from going nuclear. You thought wrong, I said. And now they're going to bury you. He sat down hard on the couch, defeated. I didn't want to lose my job. My clearance. I thought if I played middleman, if I walked both sides, I could keep it from blowing up too badly. You made it worse. And he knew it. Monica called me the next morning. We've suspended Calvin's access. He's under formal review. If he obstructed anything, the case could get complicated. What happens to everything I gave you? We'll defend its legitimacy. But now the defense can argue contamination. Credibility issues. So just like that, my own blood had become a weapon against me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Melissa didn't talk much. Her face was tight with shame and heartbreak. Calvin was her brother. She defended him. Trusted him. Encouraged me to follow his lead. He betrayed us both, she whispered. I stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Was it all about money? Or had someone gotten to him? Threatened him? Either way, the outcome was the same. He gave the enemy our map. A week later, Vaughn's legal team filed a motion to dismiss several charges, on grounds of conflict of interest and investigative misconduct. They claimed Calvin had prejudiced the investigation and that my testimony had been orchestrated by a compromised DOJ employee. The motion wasn't granted, but the judge ordered a full hearing on it. Which meant delays. Which meant Vaughn and his cronies were smiling in their holding cells. Which meant they weren't beaten yet. Monica met with me privately in her office. You need to know something, she said. This happens all the time. Whistleblowers get betrayed. Evidence gets tainted. Cases get messy. I looked her dead in the eye. So what do we do now? She leaned forward. We doubled down. Together, we mapped out a new strategy. Remove Calvin from every timeline. Reconfirm all evidence through third-party witnesses. Cross-verify metadata, server access logs, independent analysts. We rebuilt the case from the ground up. I even gave voluntary testimony under oath again, this time without Calvin anywhere near it. Jason stepped up. Ava returned. Even Richard provided a second statement, validating the dates and actions without needing Calvin's involvement. It took weeks. But slowly, piece by piece, we purged the rot. Then came the final twist. Monica called me into the SEC offices one morning, eyes gleaming. We just received a cache of internal emails from a whistleblower inside Luminous Capital. My jaw dropped. Someone knew. Yes. Anonymous. But they sent over everything. Meeting notes. Strategy documents. Internal memos. She handed me a printed page. Luminous Capital planned the Arkmore fraud months before Vaughn ever arrived. They intentionally targeted Richard for removal. And they paid off multiple insiders, not just Calvin. My hands trembled as I read it. They built this entire empire of lies, on me, I said. On Richard. On everyone who just wanted to do the right thing. Monica nodded. But they made one mistake. I looked up. They picked the wrong accountant. There's something quiet about justice. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't burst through the door with grand music playing. No. It comes like a long, slow exhale after years of holding your breath. And when it finally came for Arkmore, and for the men who thought they were untouchable, it didn't just fall like a hammer. It crushed them. The courtroom was cold. Sterile walls, humming fluorescence, the smell of cheap carpet and sharp coffee. But it might as well have been a cathedral. Because for me, it was sacred. I sat behind the prosecutors. Monica was there. Richard too, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big for his now thin frame, but his back was straight. Ava sat next to Jason in the row behind me. And to my right, Melissa. Silent. Proud. Unbreakable. When the defendants were brought in, the air seemed to shift. Vaughn Mercer, still smug, but not smiling anymore. Brenda McAllister, ashen, gaunt, her eyes twitching toward the press section. And behind them, 2 of the board members who'd orchestrated it all. They avoided my eyes. But I didn't look away. The trial was swift. With Calvin discredited, the defense tried to argue tainted evidence. But Monica's team had rebuilt the case so tightly there was no room left to wiggle. The new whistleblower from Luminous Capital had sealed the deal. Their leaked memos outlined everything. Pressure campaigns against Richard. Manipulated KPIs. Insider bonuses tied to fraudulent Q3 projections. An actual step-by-step plan to inflate Arkmore's value before an acquisition. It wasn't just fraud. It was premeditated financial warfare. One witness called it the Enron of the startup age. When the guilty pleas came, they were staggered. Vaughn pled first. He knew it was over. Brenda followed, trading information for a reduced sentence. The board members held out longer, but after 2 damning email threads were read aloud, even they broke. I didn't cheer. I didn't clap. I just sat there. Still. Quiet. Watching the wreckage of the company I'd once loved fall piece by piece. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. A young journalist shoved a mic toward me. Mr. Lawson. You were the original whistleblower, correct? Do you have anything to say? I paused. Then, softly, I said. Truth doesn't die just because it's inconvenient. It waits. And eventually, it rises. And then I walked away. Weeks passed. Then months. Arkmore filed for bankruptcy. A settlement fund was created for employees whose stock options were now worthless. I contributed half my whistleblower award to it, quietly, through an anonymous donation. Jason called me the day his check arrived. I can finally pay off my mom's hospital bills, he said, voice cracking. Thank you. You don't owe me anything, I said. You saved us, he replied. Even when nobody listened. Richard's health stabilized. He joined me as a part-time advisor at ClearPoint Integrity Consultants, the firm I started after Arkmore collapsed. Word had spread. We weren't just consultants now, we were the go-to team for whistleblower cases and forensic audits. Companies hired us not because we were soft, but because we'd survived hell and knew how to spot it coming. Then one day, I got an email. Subject, invitation, guest lecture, Wharton School of Business. They wanted me to speak on ethics in corporate finance. I stared at it for a while. Then replied with one word. Yes. That night, Melissa and I sat on the back deck, coffee in hand. Do you regret it? She asked. Sometimes, I said honestly. I lost people. Trust. My peace. But, she pressed. I looked up at the sky. But I know Richard didn't suffer for nothing. I know Ava still has her job. Jason still has his conscience. And the people who built careers on lies. I exhaled. They'll never sleep soundly again. A week later, a package arrived at our door. No return address. Inside was a small flash drive. A note was attached. This came from a former Arkmore IT contractor. It's the final internal audit you were working on, the one they deleted when they fired you. Figured you'd want it back. A friend. I plugged it in. And there it was, my last report. Untouched. My signature still at the bottom. Proof that I had always told the truth. And that's when I knew. The story was over. Not the company's. Not the court's. Mine. They took everything from me. But I took something back they'll never reclaim. My name. My integrity. My legacy. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.